Like a lot of teachers, I always talk about the beginning of my teaching career, which started at about age 7, when I taught my dolls and my stuffed animals in my bedroom. And if you walk into a room of teachers and ask for a show of hands of how many people did that, you'd be surprised at how many go up.
What does everyone need from a school experience? I think to be seen as unique.
The world is all about disruptive innovation. It's about how can we do things that'll change the way we live in the world and things we do.
At the end of that presentation, the school board president said, well, you know, Reba, we don't have 2 nickels to rub together here in the Highline District, but if you can go find the money, we like your concept. My name is Reba Gilman, and my involvement with Aviation High School was that I was fortunate enough to be the founding principal. Part of our hope was that locating in the heart of aviation, that there would leave no doubt in anybody's mind as they drove down Marginal Way or looked from I-5, that school speaks aviation.
Our principal at the time, Reba, kind of looked for teachers who had done something else. Because if you weren't a lifelong teacher, you had come from another industry, especially aviation from her perspective. But if you'd done something else, you could bring experience into the classroom that a lifelong or a full career teacher might not have had.
If students get excited about something, they'll do whatever it takes to get into that industry, get that first job. So I knew there was a lot of magic in that. What I also knew was sometimes students realized too late that they needed the academics to go with it. So I really saw the need to make sure that kids were both academically and technically prepared. And that was when we developed a concept that we thought we would do that. And we explored a lot of different ideas, but we wanted students to learn in a context. And aviation just happened to be the one that we landed on. And mainly because as we were grappling with what we could do to increase math and science, and because we were at an all-time low within the Highline District, we were in the lower quartile in the state in student assessment. So I remember one of our strategic planning team members said, well, the definition of aviation is really science, technology, engineering, math. And I thought, wow. And if kids can learn in this context, you can change that picture for them.
And what I love the most is it's a small enough environment where students get to know each other and it's like a family. Yet the students are all unique and in their own special ways.
When you have a relationship with your students, things will flow naturally for you. We'll think about all the social emotional, we'll think about how you care, and the student also will know that you care about them as well.
One of Reba's things she really taught me was if you really care about something, you expect it and you inspect it.
If you think you have something new that works for your community, go for it.
Things have changed tremendously. We don't do school the same way we used to do it 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Classrooms don't look the same anymore. Kids are not necessarily in rows, they're in groups. They're working collaboratively together. They're having opportunities to interact with not only their peers, but also adults in the community to do projects, to do learning. So I think place-based learning, I think community-based learning, I think when you think about equity at its core, that's what schools really look like now, giving access to each and every individual student and elevating their strengths as well while you're doing that.
A project allows you to fail and then come back and try again. And so, for example, when you asked about our robotics team, we have several subsystems that have to be built on the robot. All right, I can ask my kids, can we come up with 3 different ways of getting that ball inside of the robot, right? Let's try to build them as quickly as we can because we got 8 weeks to get this right. Let's find out which ones aren't going to work now so that we can figure out which one shows promise, then we can then design it better and refine it. And in the context of building the robot, the kids know that their designs aren't going to work and it's okay. And they're excited to actually build it to see if it's going to fail, to see if they have to come up with something new. So I don't want to say that they're looking forward to failure, but they know it's an option and they know they're not going to get punished for it. And so they are excited to just get going and try it out and then fix it and to make it better.
The vision for Maritime High School is equity-driven, student-centered, maritime-focused. And it's in that order for a reason. I myself consider myself a equity-driven leader. So every decision that I make, everything that I do in terms of building the culture at our school is through the lens of equity. I believe that in order for us to be able to create a school that's going to have access for all students, we have to think about those who are who are the furthest away from education, and how do we bring them closer to it.
Well, sometimes big picture generally is, I think, misperceived as, oh, that's a great option for kids who are disengaged from school. We think it's a great option for everyone because we're trying to make it about you. But it can be a real trajectory changer for kids who have lost hope in that school is a place for them. So I think that's part of it. We also really embrace exploring identity. So I think for students of color, that can be either a relief that someone's not trying to make them fit into a view of education that doesn't respect and value where they came from. And also just assignments like the Who Am I project in 9th grade and the requirement of a 75-page autobiography to graduate. Like there are these pieces of identity exploration and family engagement kind of built into how we do school. And then also with the high school, 2 days a week you're in an internship. So that broadens the possibilities to find mentors that you really connect with. Like we're trying to be facilitators at the school, not the providers of everything. And so we get that you need to be exposed to lots more people who are really gonna be a great influence in your life.
But my favorite one was when we spoke to astronauts on the International Space Station. Those people are very accomplished and intelligent and have done amazing things to get where they are, but they are people who attained that, and I think it's really important for students to see that up close. Another example of an opportunity my students have is they're building a solar car for, they've been doing that for quite a few years and racing it, and they win a lot. And so that's the kind of thing that even now I know they're doing it and I can't believe it. So those kinds of projects where you really are doing a real world cool activity that you can see the results of instead of it being a word problem.
I think what's particularly interesting is when one of my robotics kids or sometimes even a kid I've never seen before will come to me and say, I've got this project in my lit class that I have to illustrate some aspect of the novel or the book or a character, and they want to build something to help illustrate that aspect, right? And so their humanities teacher doesn't know how to help them, but they told them to come talk to me, and we then find a way of like, what is it? How do you want to refine the idea so that they can, as part of their presentation, have something physical to help explain what their thinking is. And I think that's important because it shows that when the resources are available, you cannot predict how a kid will want to apply that resource for a particular kind of learning. And at the same time, how important it is that it's not just me as a science teacher or a shop teacher, but as any teacher in the building understands what are the kinds of resources that are available to the kids, and how can those kids learn how to use those resources? Because you don't know then, the kids will always surprise you with how they want to apply a resource in the school for a particular learning goal that you as a teacher would never have come up with.
I love that we've created a place where students want to come to school, and when you build something that you can connect with students and they can envision themselves in their future, I feel like that's what we've created at the school, and that is what really is so special to me.
The mission of Raisbeck Aviation High School is to prepare all students for college, career, and citizenship. using a personalized, relevant, and rigorous curriculum in the context of aviation and aerospace. How that translates is it means that students have opportunities again to explore things that are of interest to them. It means that the work that they're doing is obviously applicable to the walls outside of the classroom. And it means that they build those connections both with each other and with industry professionals, and they can see themselves doing the kind of work that they want. Some of those students end up going into aviation and aerospace, others go into different fields.
When aviation first started, we were, I think, very lucky to be in Highline School District because they were looking for alternative models. They knew what they had been done in the past was not successful, was not being as successful as they wanted it to be. At the time, this was 2007, 2008, I think what also helped was the Gates Foundation, the Allen Foundation were investing in education and looking for different kinds of models. So there was money flowing to encourage administrations and districts to try something new.
Aviation was the brainchild of Reba Gilman, who had this idea, right? And brought it to the district and said, hey, I want to start this. We're living in the shadow of SeaTac and Boeing and Alaska Airlines. Why don't we have a aerospace aviation themed high school? And clearly the district had the vision and the smarts to say yes to that.
Find the money. And lo and behold, we did find the money through applying for a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That was our seed funding for the high school. And when that came through and was awarded, it was just a $600,000 grant. But it was enough to give us planning time and development time. So I found that, we were thrilled. And I was fortunate, I think, to work for a superintendent who really embraced innovation and was willing to take a risk because, as I was reminded so many times by people, especially those in aviation, well, are you just selling blue sky? Well, yeah, kind of, you're selling blue sky until you have enough support to go do something with it.
There's no one in the universe who expects someone to pick up a violin and play a concerto the first time they do it. In fact, most of us run screaming from the room. The idea that we could do something as complex as create a different model of teaching the first time out of the gate, exactly right, just the way we wanted it, that checked every box, and we said to ourselves at the end, damn, we're good, is just so unreasonable, right? That's not how rockets fly, it's not how planes work, it's not how innovation happens. And so the question is, what risks are you willing to take?
From the experience of starting this school, and then I've worked with a lot of people starting schools, I would say it's completely context dependent. So that's the first thing. I haven't ever seen it happen the same way twice. Sometimes a district says we need to do something new, and then they assemble a team. Other times, a couple of educators say we got to do something, and then they find the district, or they get support from their own district, or they start a charter school. So understanding that there are going to be really specific opportunities and challenges in your specific context, and then I would say try to find a network of people who have started schools to have a support system.
Our principal at the time, Reba, kind of looked for teachers who had done something else. Because if you weren't a lifelong teacher, you had come from another industry, especially aviation from her perspective, but if you'd done something else, you could bring experience into the classroom that a lifelong or a full career teacher might not have had out there.
One of the things that Reba did really well, I think, was hire people who weren't afraid to take risks, because there were lots of risks to be taken. Right, we walked into the door and given a mandate to do something project-based related to aviation and aerospace. Some of us came into that work with a deep background in aviation and aerospace. Some of us came into the work with deep background in project-based learning, but very rarely did people walk in with both. I remember very clearly 2 hours into my half-hour interview telling Reba that as confident as I was about project-based learning, I knew not so much about aviation. Sure, I had flown, but the idea of being a content expert, clearly I was not that guy yet. And so I said, you should probably find someone to get me my pilot's license. And it was a little tongue-in-cheek, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. A couple weeks later, she called and said, I hope you don't have plans on Saturday. Your flight school starts.
Project-based learning was huge. We knew we needed to provide the professional development to our staff to know how to do project-based learning, performance assessment.
True project-based learning isn't just a one-off project at the end of a class unit. It's where you cross-curricular, so you're using your math skills, your writing and reading skills and research, you're using that science inquisitiveness and looking at a big problem of practice, and you're using all of those skills together to solve a big problem, to create something.
I think it was important that Raisbeck Aviation and the staff and the students and the community had to have that permission to fail, was because we were trying to create something brand new.
I think what teachers really like about working at an innovative school, in a school like aviation, is the freedom as a teacher to fail and come back from a new idea, as much as how we want the student to feel that way, right? And maybe it's the hypocrisy sometimes of an environment where the administration is saying, no, you got to give this kid another chance, give this kid another chance. But then if you try to do something new and it doesn't work, that's it. Like, if it's good for the kid, it's also good for me.
So some of the strengths of project-based learning, and full disclosure, I like to call it learning-based projects, because I believe that the learning actually happens as the students are doing projects and really engaging. I think some of the strengths in project-based learning is that it doesn't relegate a student to just one particular course, one particular class, one particular day.
So with credits, we don't use them at all, which I don't think I can overemphasize the value of that for so many reasons. Like, I sort of believe that credit-based graduation, really the credit and the number of them and the distribution of them, is the single most important driver of what adults and kids do all day, every day. Because the whole day is structured around, you need this many of them, the whole 4-year sequence, you have to have this many of this many of that. It literally defines everything. So I think that whole thing is problematic for lots of reasons. One of the things it means is that every graduate is apparently supposed to be 4 parts language arts, 3.5 mathematics. Like, there's the sameness to it that's really problematic. And it also, it kind of assumes and predefines the purpose of everything we're doing. So no one at the school has to get together and really say, what are we doing this for? And what does that mean we should be about all day, every day? It's, oh, well, what do you mean? We got to help kids graduate. So it's kind of preset. If you take that away, one exciting thing is it forces a conversation about, well, what should be the basis of graduation? Like, that's kind of a big, important conversation. So that option does exist in Washington, and we took it in 2008. So we have a set of competencies.
We don't necessarily have grades. We subscribe to competencies. So we believe that the competencies, we have 7 competencies, and these are the areas that we want our students to be competent in when they graduate. So when they go, whether they go into the workforce directly or go into a 4-year, 2-year college, university, or technical school, trade school, they'll have 7 competency areas that they can actually articulate and talk about to their future employers, to their professors at the university. And the mastery transcript actually is a proficiency-based transcript. So students actually get to submit their artifacts, their evidence that proves that, hey, I've mastered this. This is my way of showing my grade, per se. So that's what's really fascinating about it to me, because kids really get to own their learning. They really get to tell their full story about their learning. And it's just exciting to be able to say that we're moving from information economy to innovation economy, right? So really being disruptive there. And another reason why I'm really passionate about using competency-based learning or using the mastery transcripts specifically is because when we think about the grading system, the school systems weren't started for people who look like me. They weren't started for folks of color, right? Actually, the school systems were started in a way to build systems of oppression, institutionalize racism, and really segregate people from each other, right? So we can't rely on that former way of thinking, the former way of how school systems were started in order to really do 21st century skills. So what I really appreciate about mastery transcript and competency-based learning is that it demystifies all that. It deconstructs all that. What does a B mean? What does an A mean? You can't really articulate that, right? But you can articulate, hey, I've mastered this competency. I've mastered wellness. I've mastered social reasoning. I've mastered mathematical thinking and reasoning. I've mastered design thinking, right? You're able to submit artifacts and mastery on that. Rather than reducing the kid to a letter or a number, we're really giving them an opportunity to share their full entire story of their learning.
So when we're talking about no credits, no grades, a lot of the time people go right to, well, college isn't going to happen. Colleges are completely fine dealing with a very different way of communicating about learning. They often appreciate it a lot. So if you reach out to them and make those connections, that can be really helpful. When we get rid of credit-based graduation, we can design graduation around being ready to leave high school. So a huge part of the senior year is post-high school planning. And there's, I think, a relatively to what most kids experience, immense amount of support for that. So as of this is a little bit dated, like it's gone up, but we have only 27 seniors, and it was something like 111 applications submitted, 67 acceptances, and they were at like $1.3 million in scholarships. And then we found out about like an Act 6 scholarship recipient right after that. So I think it's closer to $2 million now. So the credit thing is a non-issue with colleges, I think. I mean, it's not a non-issue in that you can't toss credits and not do anything else. But you can certainly toss credits and proceed with confidence that it's not going to be a barrier. Pretty early in our school's history, drawing on what we'd learned from another big picture school, we invited the admissions directors from all of Washington's four-year colleges to come to our campus. And this was also strategic. We didn't do anything until we had a panel of students present to them about their project work, which right away the college people were like, this is amazing. Like, and you could see them kind of like recruiting sort of the kids. After that, we got them into small groups and we asked them to respond to the question, apart from what your website says, what do kids really need to be successful at your school? Like, what are the skills and attributes a kid needs to be successful here? And there was a little bit of academic content in there, but a lot of what we would call like non-cognitive competencies, like can you navigate systems, can you realize that you need help and ask for it, can you interact with adults, all this stuff that we felt like we were doing really well. And then we asked them to think about when students don't make it at your school, what is it that causes them to not make it? And so we got all that stuff together, and then we said, which we thought was pretty true, we think we're trying to design school around those things. We're not using grades or credits. Help us talk to you about this communication piece. And so we kind of co-designed with them a competency-based transcript. So I think it's really important for schools to be designed around knowing students well, and I actually feel like our traditional systems are, I use the word abusive. I think they're harmful to kids and adults. Most adults I know who got into education did that because they really care about students. If you're working in a traditional high school, you might see 120 students a week, all of whom have a need to connect with you. And if you got into education for the right reasons, you have a real want to connect with them, and it's structurally not possible to do that on the level that you want to do it.
And I will say, the things that kids talk about, other than building a solar car and talking to astronauts, is fun they have at at advisory competitions and at dances, and when someone noticed them and when they felt supported to be who they were. And I'm obviously a counselor, I'm obviously biased toward this, but I think when students feel safe to try things and not always succeed the first time. I think a lot of students come into our school afraid to do that because we get a lot of very dedicated students, and the first thing we have to do is build trust so that they aren't not going to the board like I did. I didn't want to be on a team because I didn't want to get it wrong. And so you have to teach those skills explicitly and make students feel safe and make students trust you before they will innovate.
And they need to have at least one adult in their school who knows them, truly knows them by name, strength, and need, and cares when they show up or not, finds out when they don't show up why. And it doesn't take a ton, but there needs to be one. And when I meet with groups of students, which I try to do often, I will always say, do you have at least one adult in your school who you know, who knows you, whom you trust, whom you can go to if you need help? And if I don't see hands go up, we've got a problem. And I want to be clear, when I say we've got a problem, it's not that anyone's in trouble, right? But it's that we need to go have a conversation about what are some systems that we can put in place in that school so that every child is connected to an adult.
I really feel that adolescents need educators to do a couple of things. Number one, understand where they're at. Remembering ourselves, what it was like to be 14, 15, 16 years old with that whole future ahead of you. Do that, seek to understand what is going on in the world today. It's much different for some generations that didn't grow up with social media and phones and technology. So sometimes we have to take a step back and put ourselves in their shoes and really understand where they are. And then from there, really help open their eyes of the possibilities that are ahead of them. Be the gentle demander, the warm demander of, I'm going to hold you to high expectations. You've got this. You can do this, and then show them those possibilities. We have a pretty amazing staff at Raisbeck Aviation High School, actually a phenomenal staff. And I think probably one of the best things they love about working at Raisbeck Aviation High School are the students.
My robotics students are just horrified that I said, yeah, I'm taking your robot apart next year. It's like, what do you mean you're going to take it apart? It's like, no, I can't have 10 robots with $100,000 of invested money just sitting there when I can be reusing parts for the next kid. And so, it's wonderful that they're so emotionally attached to that because they invested so much of their time and energy and learning and understanding that I'm glad that they have this shocked response. They still have to get over it, but but it just shows that they're engaged.
And then our students who are enamored with science, they're creating projects for Science Olympiad competition. And so when you create that space for them to take what they've learned in the classroom and apply it to projects and building things, then the space is just exciting.
I think, the greatest gift of having been an educator is having students who will contact you years later, and by then you have to think for a minute about, okay, who was that student? But then they tell you what they're doing and what an impact that their education had on them.
And as you know, this year we launched our Maritime High School, modeled much after Raisbeck Aviation, but clearly with a maritime theme. And I think it's about providing as wide array of options for students as we can, because we know every student's an individual and they all learn differently.
Where do you start for a school like Maritime, or where you start just in general when you're opening a brand new school? You have to start with the vision, right? I think, having a vision for the school, what do you desire for it to be? What do you desire for it to accomplish? And then you'll be able to get folks to come in line with you and fall in place and be able to support you. I think had we not had the vision for Maritime, I know there was a dearth in the maritime industry. A lot of people talk about what's called a silver tsunami. So there's a lot of folks who've been in the maritime industry, whether it be legacy, whether it be a friend of a family, or just having information about the maritime industry. And now they've been in there 25, 30 plus years, and now things are starting to transition, they're starting to retire out. And so there's opportunities that are there that some kids may not know exist. So being student-centered is really at the core of what we do at our school in terms of our culture, ensuring that we're being very highly relational, highly connected with our students, and having some sort of trusted adult and individual that they can actually reach out to and share information with. And then last but not least, maritime focus, right? Can't have a maritime high school without having that maritime focus piece. And I always tell people that the great community partners that we're connected to really put the blue in maritime. And what I mean by that is your Northwest Maritime Center out in Port Townsend. They really are providing those educational experiences that are powerful for our students, those enriching, those hands-on, hearts-on, and minds-on experiences that students actually need to feel connected to the maritime industry. Your Port of Seattle, that's really contributing in a way to help our students really know and understand what the workforce development can look like in the future. DRCC, Duwamish River Community Coalition, another organization that's really dedicated to environmental justice and how do we think about water quality and water conservation. So these are just three of the organizations, the top three, or the powerful three, or what I like to call the core four, because Highline Public Schools is in there as well, that really allow for Maritime High School to have this vision of being a school that's equity-driven, student-centered, and maritime focused. The way that funding works at Maritime High School, so we are a public school, so we do have public allocations from the federal and the state government, but we also are privately funded as well. And what's helpful is that to have strong partnerships that contribute from a charitable donation arm. I always tell people that our partners are not only put the blue in maritime, they also put the green in maritime as well. So as a school, we have the bare FTE, we have the BEA, we have the allocations that are given to us by the state. But in order for us to run a program like we run, where we have 2 fieldwork experiences per week, where you have kids really getting out on water, going on vessels, going on boats and kayaks, really being able to have all the transportational needs met to get to these places, you have to fund it up a little bit more. And so our partners really step in really well with the charitable donation arm and doing all the fundraising. More specifically, Northwest Maritime Center is really the powerful partner that we do have that really puts the green in maritime. So if a student wants to go to Maritime High School, we are a lottery-based school. So therefore, there is an application that goes with that. And even right now, we're accepting students. We're accepting a class of 100 next year. And every year, every cohort will be about 100. You don't have to have somebody that's in the maritime industry. You don't have to have letters of recommendation. You just have to have a passion for learning, right? And I tell people all the time that even if you may not necessarily have a passion for maritime, but you might find it. And so our goal is really to foster that learning for you.
So we have a young lady who came as a freshman 3 years ago, and she was kind of unsure about, what she wanted to get out of aviation. She just knew that, she was excited to learn, and no knowledge whatsoever about any machinery or tools. She will tell you herself she didn't know the difference between a flathead and a Phillips screwdriver. And 3 years later, she is the president of our solar car team. Speaking to the public about the cars, she can tell you all about engineering, design, and mechanical and electrical. And I mean, just like she has just blossomed. She was just the kind of this shy, ninth grade, didn't know very many people, and she is just rocking it.
So as kids are at our school, we have quarterly projects. So one of the projects that our kids are working on right now currently is water conservation and water quality work. So this is something that's really happening in the real world now, right? We think about microplastics. We think about some of the stuff that's in the water that shouldn't be in there. And so kids get an opportunity not only to do research in the sciences and the technologies and the engineering and the mathematics, they also get to do that research and then present that to some of our local legislators here. So it becomes more not only STEM, but also humanities and the point that you're being a good citizen.
A really powerful part of our program is also mentoring and internships. And I'd like, just specifically in my role, I think we have a huge opportunity in the career and college access specialist role, or what when I was in high school was called a career counselor, to do a lot of that rather than sort of a traditional model. And Highline's been great about shifting to that, doing the college visits, but also giving students opportunities to to get some pretty powerful internship experiences as well.
We're very fortunate enough to have a schedule set up that's flexible. So our goal is to give students at least 2 days out of the week some sort of fieldwork experience, some sort of fieldwork curriculum. That could look like from actually going out to the Duwamish River, doing water quality and concentration work, looking to see what kind of plankton's in the river. Or it could be on site as well, where students currently are working on building and constructing canoes, right, out of scratch. So field work is really about how do you take what you've learned in the school week and apply it to something real life, right? So students have been learning geometry and mathematics, and so they're able to take the information that they learn. They actually currently are using CAD, computer aided design, to design pieces that they have to be able to create the canoes and then actually build them in real life, right? So how do you apply that learning to something real? You make it tangible, right? So fieldwork experience are really about making the learning come alive, in my opinion. So, and we have the flexibility in our schedule to be able to do that for at least 2 days out of the week. Now, I'll be honest, it doesn't always happen twice a week, right? But our goal has always been to give kids more experiences outside the classroom than inside the classroom, because that's where the real learning is actually happening.
One of my colleagues is really fond of saying, in response to what does a typical day look like, what does a typical week look like, who's the student? Which I really love, because it helps me remind myself that, oh yeah, that hopefully that's not very similar for two students. But let's just say you're a ways in and you have an internship as a high school student. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you would be at school. You're in an advisory pretty much all day. I mean, you might go and come, but we don't have classes that you go to. There's no bell. You've been with this advisor for multiple years. You've been with the same 17 or so kids for multiple years. So a ways into the first year, it's like kind of has a family feel, hopefully. Everyone has a learning plan, so the kind of the week is based on what's going on this week for us as a group, and then what's going on with you and your learning plan. What do you need to get done? There's some group activities, like there might be Socratic discussions, or the advisory might be reading a particular book together. And we also do relatively direct math instruction at the same time, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then Tuesday and Thursday, the student might go to wherever their internship is, directly from home, or sometimes they might come to school.
When it comes to education, I'm just passionate about connecting people who need power to those who have power, so that the maritime industry can be powerful, right? I think our kids need that opportunity. They need the opportunity to see themselves in the maritime industry. They also need the opportunity to learn from folks in the maritime industry.
You know, could there be another aviation school or school like this, but for the tech industry or the health services industry? And the answer is always absolutely yes. That the model of Aviation High School in other districts, other public schools, and create the opportunity for more students. But you're giving more students to pursue something that they're passionate about.
I just love working with teenagers. I think their energy, their curiosity, their creativity, they want to step out and be prepared for that next part of life. And I just think they're optimistic. Some of them may not be as confident as you would like them to be, but I think it's just such a wonderful opportunity to get them to that next step.
A lot of times we don't give kids enough credit. And what's the best part of teaching is being around the kids and the students, that they just come in with an open mind in a lot of cases. And if those minds are closed, I think it's more because of the environment they came in. But kids love to learn. Kids really do love to learn. I haven't met a kid who, when they learn something new and they really get it, you don't see a shine in their eyes and a smile on their face.
So I feel like what people need from school is for the school to be designed around knowing them really well.
I think the number one thing adolescents need is belonging and relationships, no matter how innovative or not innovative their school is. I believe in what aviation has done and continues to do.
Adolescents now, I think, need the same kinds of things that adolescents have always needed, right? A sense of community, a sense of contribution, a sense of autonomy, a sense that they have, that they're being appropriately challenged in new and interesting ways.
So we've had our big picture, middle and high school for many, many years. Racebeck Aviation High School, which is a regional magnet school, we've also had for many, many years. And as you know, this year we launched our Maritime High School, modeled much after Racebeck Aviation, but clearly with a maritime theme. And I think it's about providing as wide array of options for students as we can, because we know every student's an individual and they all learn differently. And so the other example I would give is that out of the pandemic, when we were in distance learning, we did have, distance learning was hard for many of us, but there were some students who did thrive in that environment for whatever reason. And I just believed strongly that it would be unconscionable for us to take that option away from them. So this year we launched our Highline Virtual Academy for grades 6 through 12, and we're actually launching our Highline Virtual Elementary next year.
It was just one of the best opportunities in the world. For me, as an educator, it'll be the most challenging you may ever attempt, but I think it's the most rewarding. And again, it goes back to those relationships, where kids go, and the friends you make along the way.
So it's not just innovation, it's really innovating to meet the needs of our kids.